You know, as doing the praise and worship, and I was being tempted not to sing because I thought maybe my throat might get a little too raw. I says that wouldn't be giving God the worship. That wouldn't be giving God the credit. So I sang with you all. I keep on getting the goosebumps every Sunday I come here and singing with you all. I shared with Pastor Dennis the other day that I'd invited my fan club to be here, and they're sitting in the back row with Susie Q back there with the camera. And before I even got it out and explained what I meant, I call you Pastor also, Dennis, because you are our associate pastor and I respect you. He says, you do have a fan club. And that's you all. That's our church here. And I have to say that because, as my opening, because you all have accepted Artis and I with open arms, open hearts. You've made us feel welcome and been part of this body of believers since day one when we went in. Our intentions at first when we started coming here was to come here every other Sunday because we was involved with another church. But Pastor Joe said he had bigger visions for us. I don't need to share the visions with you now. They are coming later. If you would just bow your heads and go with me in prayer. Father, today is about you. It's not about me. Even though this is a personal testimony, my personal testimony that you have given me. I pray, Father, that you give me the ability to give the message and put in this in a way to be well-pleasing in my sight. Not for my glory, but for yours, because without you, none of us here would be anything. We'd all be failures. And I thank you for this, Jesus, right now. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. One of the things I can boldly testify to, and I am blessed and thankful to be able to do it. Mom and Dad made for sure my brother and I was always in church. They had the golden rule. If you lived underneath my roof, you are going to go to church. I don't care if you want to go or not. Dad was always a leader in the church. He was always a member of the church board. He would always go and visit people every time he had a chance. We had a silent roll call card that we always filled out every Sunday. And on it had, if they had a spiritual need that they needed, if they needed somebody to come to their house and visit them, Dad would be always wanting to go there and visit them. If there was a check mark on there about if they were a first-time visitor and they liked somebody to be there to go see them, Dad would always be one of the first ones to go knocking on their door. I remember one tale about Dad that has always stuck in my heart to show you what kind of a man he was. One time he went on a visitation meeting at this family's home. And when he got there, the gentleman told him, well, I really like your church. But it's just paraphrasing a little bit of it because it's a memory of a long time ago, but he says, it's just too spiffy of a church. They dress up too much. And I really don't have that many good dress clothes. And he says, I do have some, but I don't have a pair of shoes that's decent enough to wear with my dress clothes. And I don't feel comfortable going there. Well, Dad started talking to him about it and all, and they joked around a little bit about it. And then all of a sudden came to the conclusion that both of them had the same size shoes, and Dad's shoes was a fairly new pair of shoes. Dad took off that pair of shoes, and he handed them to the gentleman. And he said, I'll give these to you on one condition, and that condition is that you come to our church. And he was there that next Sunday. My name is Donald Hugh. Not really Donald, I mean Don. I like to be called Donald. In the early 50s, Donald didn't really have that much popularity except for Walt Disney. And I'm letting out a little bit of a secret here that I always get teased about. I was named Donald and I was named Hugh, who was famous back in the 50s by Walt Disney. Donald Duck and Huey. So I grew up Donald Duck, baby Huey. But they named me Hugh for one special reason. Their preacher at the time, his name was Hugh Sensible. They named me Hugh in hopes that I would become exactly like Brother Hugh Sensible, and I would become a preacher or a minister, and I would sing exactly like Brother Hugh. Brother Hugh was very, very special in Mom and Dad's hearts. Mom and Dad were dating, and Dad wasn't saved yet. And Mom invited him to go to church, and Dad said yes. And that very Sunday night when they were there, Brother Hugh preached one of his sermons he thought was pretty good, but he just didn't think it was the kind of sermon that he'd give an invitation for. So he just had one of his church deacons to dismiss him in prayer. And they dismissed. And they were getting ready to leave. And Dad looked real upset, and Mom asked him, what's wrong? Dad says, well, if the pastor and preacher, Brother Hugh, would have given an invitation, that would have been the time that he would have given his heart to God. Mom got all excited. She called for Brother Hugh and told him what was going on. Brother Hugh stopped everybody who was leaving and said, we have to do something. Everybody come back in. And they took Dad's confession of faith, and he was baptized. So you see, I've been raised in a godly atmosphere. The only thing I can say negative as far as Mom and Dad and the way they raised us is God was never mentioned in our home. As far as Bible studies and devotions, it was the church's responsibility to bring us up in a proper manner. I used to do my own Bible studies by myself. Our church was a Christian church, non-denominational church. And their beliefs were good. But one of the things that happened to me while I was doing my Bible study one night, I fell on my knees and I was weeping. I was angry because I've been doing a study about the Old Testament prophets. And I was angry at the time. I says, God, where are you? Why is it that you don't talk to people today? Why is it everything in the Bible is like a history lesson? You're dead to us today. Why? Why can't we hear your voice? Because they taught and still do teach today that you cannot hear the voice of God. But I also started reading besides the Bible. I read a story about a famous preacher. A man called Peter was the name of the book. His name was Peter Marshall. He's born and raised in Scotland. And he came to the United States. He heard the call of God to go into the ministry at a very early age. When I was reading his testimony, I remember I started crying because I remembered about my destiny. I was named after Brother Hugh, and I was supposed to be a minister. I knew that. I grew up with it. And I felt the call of God in my heart at that early age of 16 to go into the ministry and do what God had called me to do. I enrolled to go to Cincinnati Bible Seminary right after high school. Before I got the answer back from Cincinnati Bible Seminary, I was having my graduation party. And my friends were around, and Mom walked up to me, she handed me an envelope. She says, I don't need to know what's inside an envelope. I don't need to open up that envelope to know what is inside it, because I've seen it before. I saw it because of your brother. She says, you're not going to be a preacher, you're not going to go to Cincinnati Bible College. And I says, yes, I am. I opened up the envelope, it was my draft physical notice. I was so bound and determined I was going to go to Bible college. I prayed for God to lay me, to give me something wrong. Do something I won't be able to pass a physical. I don't want to go to serve Uncle Sam, I want to serve you. I even had a dream one night. I was working at the cemetery as a caretaker, mowing lawn, mowing the grass and everything around the headstones, doing everything. Good first job, wasn't it? I kept on feeling, I don't want to be here in this job. I don't want to serve the dead. I want to serve the living, because that's what I was called to do. But in this dream, I had not wanted to go so bad to the army. I had a dream that I let my foot slip underneath the lawnmower, and my foot was cut to the point I flunked the physical. That next day when I went to work, I actually thought of that dream. And I prayed about it, and God said no, I couldn't do it. even tried to be a conscientious objector. I tried for an educational deferment. Nothing worked. They told me I was definitely going to be drafted. I had to serve Uncle Sam. So I went ahead and I enlisted in the Army for 3 years to follow my family's tradition. My daddy was a World War II veteran, and my brother was a Vietnam War veteran. He served as a mechanic. I thought I was always going to follow a family tradition. I didn't want to be like that and build airways for the planes to live in. I mean, land on during the war. I didn't want to do that. I thought, well, okay, I could be like my vehicle mechanic, just like my brother. But during those 3 years I was in the service, I found out what it was like to be away from mommy and daddy. I found out what it was like to be away from God. I got married. It started out as being a very, very good marriage. We seemed to be very happy, but I went on levy and I was transferred to Germany. I kept on sending for her to go over to Germany with me, but she didn't want to come. Finally, I got her over there. One night she was laying in the bed with me, and she started crying. She says, I have a confession to give to you. The reason why I didn't show up any sooner than I did is I had an affair with another guy that I dated before you and I met. And I would not blame you if you wanted a divorce. I asked her, I says, do you feel that God has forgiven you for what you've done? Yes. I told her, I says, I can understand it, I says, in a way, because it wasn't our fault that we were torn apart. Uncle Sam did that to us. It wasn't God. It wasn't our doings. Now I told her, I says, if God's forgiven you, then I don't have any right but to forgive you myself. Because if God has forgiven you for what you've done, God doesn't have any memory of it. So I feel like I do not have any right to remember this also against you. Our marriage went along for a while, and things turned out to be pretty good. But one day we got in the heat of an argument. I used one word that is no longer in my vocabulary, 2 words that's no longer in my vocabulary now as a counselor and as a minister. I asked her if she wanted a separation or a divorce, and it was in the heat of the moment, the heat of an argument. She looked at me and she said yes. I packed up all my Army gear that very night and I moved back into the barracks. One of my roommates and I went to go visit her one night. She didn't want to open up the door. I had to push to open the door. And I walked in her little house, and there was another guy living with her. I sent her home to be with Mom and Dad. She got the divorce. I did not want it. I'm not excusing myself for what I did because I know that it was not right. And I know some of you have got the same testimony. I was away from Mom and Dad. I was away from the church. I wasn't even going to the military chapel. As the song goes, some people turn to different things. I turned to the bottle. And I became an alcoholic while I was in the Army. I drank all the time. To the point that I felt like I had to be drunk, even at my duty station as a mechanic. One time a motor pool sergeant walked up to me and he said, Specialist Taylor, get me something to drink. I looked at him and I said, Sarge, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I've got a sore throat. You don't want my sore throat. And he says, I'm giving you a direct order. Give me a sip of your drink. What I was doing is I was drinking about 3/4 of the Coke and then pouring the Coke can the rest of the way full with Jim Beam whiskey because I felt like I had to be drunk all the time. The motor pool sergeant looked at me and he says, Specialist Taylor, he says, you need to go get help for yourself. If you don't go get help on your own, I am going to have to get it for you. And if I have to get it for you, it is going to ruin your military career. You will not be able to re-enlist, and you will get a dishonorable discharge. I asked him, I says, Sarge, please give me a chance. I went to the military chaplain who I never knew, never saw before, and I received counseling from him. He challenged me to turn my life around and rededicate my life, but that wasn't what hit me the most. I was getting ready to get out of the service. And I did not want Mommy and Daddy to see me the way that I was. I wanted them to think that I was still the good boy that they brought up in church. I didn't want to let them see me as an alcoholic or somebody who's drinking all the time. So I quit cold turkey. I went back home to be with Mom and Dad and started going back to the Christian church that I was raised in. My friends and the people of the church did not want to have anything to do with me at all. They all seemed to shun me. They would turn their back to me or they would walk away. My best friends that I grew up with, they didn't want to even talk. I said, that's okay, I don't need them. I'm going to go to Cincinnati Bible Seminary and I'm going to be a preacher. I don't need them. Mom said I had the wrong attitude. She says the reason why that they are the way they are. They know that you have a broken heart because of the divorce. They know you fought a battle. They don't know what to say, so their method of handling this is they decided not to do anything at all. I had two very close friends at that time. One was named Tim, another was named Barry. Barry and I have been friends since 4th grade in grade school. We're still like brothers today. Tim and I used to have little Bible studies together when we were kids. We'd go up in his room, we'd open up the Bible, and we'd read things about what God did and everything. Him and I used to get so excited. One day he looked at me and he says, I got something to tell you. He says, you know, I've been thirsty for more of God. I said, yeah, Tim, what happened? What happened? He said, well, I wanted to speak in tongues. Exactly opposite of what we were taught was right in our church. But he says, I went in my closet where nobody could see, just like Paul taught. Go in a private place. And he says, I closed myself in that closet. And I started speaking in tongues. And I says, well, how was it? I could do loud. You know, so he didn't understand what